Moe, I could really use your help.
Can I get a chee-hoo?
Okay, so Moana 2. It's here now, and well, it's been described quite a few different ways, to say the least. Does anyone here actually remember some of the older direct-to-DVD Disney sequels? I only ask because, of course, I've seen someone in the animation community already describe Moana 2 as a direct-to-DVD sequel. And yeah, I pretty much agree. There's a lot there that you can connect to those types of films, and especially with Moana 2, unfortunately enough, if you see it that way. Of course, I know that Disney has some fans of their direct-to-DVD sequels, so I'm not going to bash those films too much, and I'm just going to move on to reviewing Moana 2. And straight up, I'm just going to say that this review will be a non-spoiler review, so if you're afraid of spoilers, do not worry. I will not spoil this film for you. Okay, so is Moana 2 a worthy sequel to the original film that came out 8 years ago? Well, no. Not really. No. And no. Maui and Moana have returned for a new adventure, and this time Moana has her own crew. This time round, Moana is on a journey to be the Wave Finder, to find an ancient island, to resolve a curse and reunite her people with all the peoples of the ocean. Okay, so, Moana 2. It's another animated adventure film from Disney. And yeah, Disney hasn't had the best track record with these types of adventure film recently. See Strange World for the new disaster that was. And, of course, Moana 2 now. And funnily enough, just as I talk about Strange World, I realised that it and Moana 2, in some ways, share the same flaws. Jumping straight into the review, I'm going to say that this film's biggest flaw is the same flaw that Strange World had. That being that its wider cast just isn't interesting enough. I mean, Maui and Moana still have good interactions with one another, just like they did in the first film, but the wider cast in this film just really aren't too interesting at all. I mean, just like in Strange World, the wider cast in this film is basically only around, not really to do much until the very end of the film, and it makes their existence feel less impactful and less interesting, really. Now, before I go on and be too negative, I do want to actually be positive for a little while and just talk about the animation. Sure, Disney hasn't quite risen to the lengths of DreamWorks and others to be as experimental with their animation as DreamWorks has, per se, but in this film, the animation still does look quite good. There's a lot of water effects and a lot of great textures and a lot of great small details. Although I'd like to see Disney do a little bit more to experiment with the presentation of their animation, I do have to say that this film does look really quite good. Now, in speaking for the animation, I do want to say that it is really good and basically worth a watch just for the animation itself. However, the animation being so good does a little bit more to distract from just how poor some of the characters are written and how uninteresting some of the film can be. But still, that's not really a problem with the animators, and more of a problem of the scriptwriters and directors. Just on my last note for the animation, I want to say that everything in this film looks really well designed. From the character designs, to the props, and to the settings. Everything looks really well designed. The designs are all imaginative and very colourful. This film is actually a joy to look at, although I do still hope that Disney does do a little bit more to explore just how they present their animated films in the future. I do really hope that every animator who worked on this film gets generously rewarded for all of their work. Now, with all of that praise given, it's unfortunately time to get back to the negative stuff. And the first bit for me would have to be, well, I personally believe that Disney has a little bit of a tactic to rush their films just to get them delivered on certain holidays. And yeah, this is another one of those for me. This might not be an actual tactic of theirs, and people can disagree with me, but it is something I feel like I've noticed and think I've seen before, so yeah, attitudes may vary. Anyway, returning to the topic of the film itself, I do feel as if this film struggles just a little bit, largely because of the characters. The wider cast surrounding Moana and Maui just don't seem to be as interesting as the film thinks they are. Honestly, for me, the characters are what make a good animated adventure film. If the characters aren't interesting enough to hold their own stories, in addition to the story being told, then yeah, it's not something that's going to work for me personally. And it's a shame because, of course, you can see the film trying to present the characters interestingly, but unfortunately these attempts largely fall flat because the characters, of course, don't have enough time because the time's being shared between all of the characters in the film, and of course because Moana is the titular main character, so of course the characters and the wider cast mainly have their stories evolve around her, right up until eventually the characters are needed for some pivotal story moment, at which point they're dragged back into the centre of the frame and put on display. And this is kind of something that makes me feel as if the writing for the film is just a little bit lazy, because of course they're not giving the characters enough, and sometimes there are just too many characters doing too many things, and sometimes there are just characters not doing enough, and all this comes together to make for a less interesting adventure film. And now onto the topic of the adventure itself. And yeah, watching the film, this did come across to me as pretty much your standard Disney sequel adventure. And before moving on, I will say that of course I don't know much about Polynesian myth. I'd probably have to do some research, but I will say that the myths do seem to be well presented as inspirations for the film. However, just in terms of the writing for the story, yeah, some things feel a little mismatched. I mean, some things just feel a little off balance between Disney writing and, of course, Polynesian myth. But hey, who knows? Maybe I'll actually research Polynesian myth and find out they're 100% on the money or something. Hey ho. Anyway, back to the review. As a film on its own, this film lacks a little bit, but as a sequel, well, as a sequel to Moana, this film still lacks a little. But just as a general Disney sequel, this film is basically imaginative enough. The characters and story are fairly standard, however you do still have Moana and you do still have Maui, and they are just as interesting as they were in the last film. However, you do also have the great presentation of the animation, and the music, whilst I'm not a massive music person, I will just say is fairly okay, but hey, I'll leave that to the musicians in the audience to be the judge of, and yeah. Now, closing out this review, I do want to say that this is definitely going to be a film that people are going to either love or hate. It's going to be something that I really think is going to have people a little bit polarised on, and it's definitely going to be something worth having people actually go out and watch for themselves to form their own opinions on. And of course, I don't want to spoil too much with this review. I would have liked to have actually said more, but I didn't want to scare anybody away with spoilers. So, with that said, I will say now that you should go out and watch Moana 2 for yourselves now. That way you can form your own opinions on the film and add to the conversation, because I do see this as being a film that the more people talk about it, the more people will find something to either enjoy or not enjoy about the film. Okay, so, in conclusion, Moana 2 for me is just an imaginative enough Disney sequel. Of course, it's got a few flaws of Disney's adventure film writing, which I hope will improve in the future, but still, this is something that I know I will have to agree to disagree on with a lot of people, as I can see a lot of different opinions coming out about this film in the future. So yeah, that was Moana 2 for me. Tell me what you guys thought of it in the comments below, and tell me what you're looking forward to coming out next. Anyway, until then, like, subscribe, and do all the YouTube stuff, and goodbye.